Thanks so much for joining us again on Dear Frannie. I am your host, Catherine LeBlanc, Chief Marketing Officer, currently serving as a fractional resource for brands that are looking to bring in marketing resources, but not quite at a full-time level. I am so excited about this week's hosts. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We're going to kick it off first with Maureen Anders.
Hey, Catherine. All right. My name is Maureen Anders. I am the co-founder and CEO of AR Workshop, and we are a do-it-yourself art studio. We basically our art as entertainment concept, and we teach hands-on classes to make home decor from raw materials.
Awesome. And our second panelist today is JT Thiessen.
Thanks. I'm the Chief Development Officer for a company called Home Franchise Concepts, and that's an umbrella brand that has 10 home service franchises underneath it, mostly dealing with things that we do in and out the homes. And I'm fortunate to lead a team of about 20 people that help grow those brands.
Amazing. Very excited to jump in with you guys today. And I think we have some interesting questions to tackle. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to kick off with our hot takes. And I'm going to put JT on the spot to share first.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting to come up with what I think. I've got a lot of ideas right now, but I've been talking to a lot of people about responsible franchising lately. It's something that a lot of people are sort of really starting to pay attention to. And I think in a way it's a result of the waterfall effect of private equity coming into franchising and this race to get all these units in. And so I think my hot take is that I feel like if someone does not have previous business experience or franchise experience, they should not have more than 2 territories awarded to them at the onset. We're seeing a lot of these 5-packs and 10-packs being sold, and I just don't think it's the right way to go about it. I don't think it's responsible. So that's my take.
Yeah, well, and this will be interesting, Maureen. I know that obviously you built your brand from the ground up. And I know that I've talked to new founders, especially new founders who are partnering with outside sales organizations who want to sell those packs. And so I'm curious, what do you take from that?
I mean, I'd have to agree. Our concept is very, it does best when it's owner operated. And I think that people don't know what they're getting into until they run the first unit. And so we early on didn't want to sign on more than one, because the last thing we wanted is for a bad operator to own more than one territory and fail or not do so hot. And then now we're stuck with them being guaranteed 2, 3, 4, 5 units. So to me, quality over quantity, and just for the longevity of the franchisees. So I'd have to agree with you, but I don't have private equity or pressure on me to sell more units. Ours was very organic growth. So yeah. I can see where people would have that pressure, but I'd have to agree with you on that.
Well, and as a general statement, from a business case, when I talk to people about what are the pros and cons of selling a territory versus selling one. And so, when you sell a territory, great, that you have assurances that territory is going to be developed. You also get to work maybe with less franchisees in that territory. One of the challenges that I had in some of my bigger brands was bringing those franchisees together to get on the same page. And so that does become a lot easier when you just have one person to do that. But I think that, JT, to your point, that what you lose, I think from purely a business perspective, you lose that quick to open that you need as an emerging, especially as an emerging, but with any franchise brand, you're going to open faster if you have 5 people working in that market at the same time versus everything held up in a development agreement. And so I think you could make a case, not just from a responsible franchise, obviously we should all be in business to make our owners successful. And that should be what we put in front of everything else. But I could also kind of make some business cases around why selling one at a time might be a good practice.
Yeah, I think it's just what we're seeing right now is that a lot of these people are and especially emerging brands, they're in this race to get to 100 or 200 units, so that then private equity will come in and take the ownership out and off they go. And I think what we're seeing on our side as a company that looks at acquisitions in the marketplace is that we're seeing a lot of these that are heavy on the sold but not open. And when you dig behind the scenes a little bit more, you realize that probably a lot of these are never going to get open because they're struggling with their second unit and they've got 5 more on the development schedule. And if they don't get profitable a lot quicker, it's probably never going to get there. And that's the thing that I hate to see, is because people are investing a lot of money up front in this dream of growing out these units, and a lot of times it's just never happening.
So I want to ask you, you know, sometimes, because I've also seen this in emerging brands that are super hot, right? And you're like, no, I'm going to give you one, we're going to see how you do, and then we'll go from there. Sometimes the franchisee is anxious to kind of own the market before they even open one because they're so nervous about somebody else coming in and taking the opportunity. I'm curious as to how you kind of talk them through the process of that's, you know, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, it's never easy, right? People, they've got big dreams, and I think it's our responsibility, again, coming back to that word, is to understand that most people coming into this, no matter where they're coming from, think that they're going to be the best, they're going to be huge, it's going to be great. And the reality is it's hard. And a lot of people have never done this before and they don't realize how hard it is. And so it's our job to make sure that they're not getting overextended, and to say, listen, if you grow, we want to grow with existing franchisees. It's easier. We know what we have. And we love to do that, but let's not get so that you're so top heavy that you never get off the ground. And that's just where we have to say, listen, if you have to have the entire Charlotte market and you're not going to sign unless you can have it, then I have to be willing to walk away and say, no, I got to find somebody that's going to do it in a way that I know will be successful long term. And even if that means saying no sometimes, which is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really good insights.
And it makes them want to perform with their first store too. If they know, like, hey, my goal is to have 3 or 4, I always tell them, look, we're going to come to you first. If you're performing well and we have an inquiry in the area, we're not going to put it in writing. There's no first right of refusal for us anyway in writing, but operationally it makes sense to help you scale if you're performing well and if you have good processes in place and you're following our brand standards. And then let's look at see when it makes sense to open a second or third unit. So I think it's kind of like a test for them. It's almost an interview process then at that point.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
I love
love that kind of carrot, right? So you're dangling a carrot to get them to perform at their best to then be more successful in the future. That's great.
Right. Yeah.
Good stuff. All right, Maureen, what's your hot take?
I had a couple. The one that I think that's unique maybe to my model because we started it, I'm one of the founders, when we were growing our team, we hired franchisees. And I know as I've been speaking to other franchisors, it seems like most people say that's a bad idea. Don't ever hire a franchisee.
Yeah.
So I would love your guys' take on it because I see now, 7 years later, the pros of it and the cons of it. For me, the pros were they loved the brand, they were already invested, they, understood the day-to-day, they understood the problems, they understood how certain things could impact and make them better. I think the cons were that, they're going to have this possible conflict of interest of time. So do they spend time on their job with me or do they spend time with their business? And that's been a challenge. And there's been kind of this weighing. I've had to weigh it out in a lot of cases. And now that we're about 7 or 8 years old, I have hired outside, or those franchisees have sold their stores to become full-time employees for us. So I would love your guys' take on that.
I certainly have an opinion.
Yeah.
I'll let GT go first.
No, I'll jump in. Some of our best support folks that we have in our systems are former franchisees of ours. And for whatever reason, the challenge is always, well, if they didn't make it as a franchisee for whatever reason, then why should they be telling other people how to succeed in the way of coaching or whatever that might be? And the thing is that business ownership isn't for everybody. Sometimes they get into it and realize that they were a lot happier when they were on the corporate side, and it doesn't make them a bad person or inability to coach. They have a lot of love for the brand. They know what to do. They just necessarily weren't able to execute on it for whatever reason. So we found a lot of success in that. I don't know that we've ever had anybody that was wearing both hats at the same time, though. I think they always had to surrender their business or sell it or whatever, and move on, and then we bring them on for that same reason, because you really can't be successful if you're trying to grow your business on one hand and also serve the franchisees on the other. It does create some conflicts in that regard. So I could see that, but certainly former franchisees have been great for us.
Yeah. Yeah, JT, that is what we did. We had some employees that were, part-time, but they still had their business. And then when we went to go hire our next round, we told those franchisees, look, we want to hire you. There's no rush, but if you sell your store, and they were actually really successful, but they were ready for something new. If you sell your store, then we can look at bringing you on the corporate team. So, and that has worked out really well.
And I would say for me, the nervousness that I would get on bringing on a franchisee, a current franchisee into the corporate team is not necessarily the conflict of interest of time, but we've seen this time and again in our FACs and when we leverage franchisees for input and other things. The conflict of interest I see comes from what is good for what is good for me, good for the system. And will that person be able to make decisions that kind of thinks through the bigness and scalability that you need for the system? And if you're bringing in someone who, is a legacy franchisee who has hung out in the brand for a while, and now they're taking on a role in HQ, will there be conflicts of interest? Because we know that systems develop cliques and kind of inside, groups. And so will their point of view of a franchisee that they had while they were a franchisee impact their ability to help that franchisee in the future? And so it's a little more kind of existential. But to add to that, one thing that I have seen is that I would love your take on employees at headquarters actually wanting to purchase a franchise and whether or not that is allowed within the franchise. When I first started in franchising, we had a lot of people who were purchasing the franchise as headquarters employees. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was a testament to the stability of the brand, what they believed, having that inside track and still wanting to invest in this. I thought it was really a positive, but eventually, they stopped that opportunity. And so I'm, to piggyback on your hot take, like, do you guys have any policies in place of whether or not you're going to sell a franchise to a headquarters employee and or let them stay as a headquarters employee in the process?
Yeah, we do have a policy that says you can't do that, and we learned kind of the hard way as well. We were doing it, but then usually it was spouses, even like someone's wife was going to run the business and he was going to stay at corporate, and there was just too many conflicts that went on. If the person at work wasn't performing as he should, and yet you still got a franchisee that's in the system, it just created a lot of challenges that we didn't really need to have. And so we love when our folks want to become franchisees, but they can't be both. So they have to pick or choose at this point.
Yeah. Maureen, do you have any policies in place?
We don't have any policies. It has not been something that has been a request at this point. It was kind of vice versa. They were franchisees that became corporate employees. So, and most of our team is here in the Charlotte market. So all the territories are taken. So if they were somewhere else, then it may be different, but that makes sense. I think there is kind of that conflicting time that you're fighting against.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, my hot take for today is marketing based. Surprise, surprise. But I've been working with a number of my brands on their digital media, and what is the right approach to digital media. What I have seen and what my hot take is that on a quest to get the cheapest cost per lead possible, which is the cheapest, when you make an advertisement, the person who fills in the form through that journey, that your cost per lead is your cost divided by the amount that you spent. And in an effort to get that as cheap as possible, I have found that creative and copy are very transactional in a way that is, in my opinion, damaging the brand as far as, you know, not necessarily putting brand values first or brand look or aesthetics first, and really trying to go after that transactional relationship. And, you know, my hot take is we need to stop doing that because to me, you're losing out on an opportunity of building trust with that person through brand development, brand loyalty. Even in as simple as a meta ad with an image and a paragraph of copy, like let's dial it back and let's make sure that it's communicating what your brand values are in regards to how it's going to help your customer then solve whatever problem your brand is solving. You know, at the end of the day, I'm just seeing, and it's not necessarily digital marketers and marketing agencies, it's digital marketers that are driven to this low CPL, which is not a success metric of your digital marketing. And to get there, they're, in my opinion, doing long-term damage to the brand. But it's hard to move them away from that transactional to, you know, it's got to be transactional with brand.
So when you're saying transactional, can you give me like an example of?
So I have a couple of brands out right now. And they are, for example, showing an image that doesn't necessarily align with the brand guidelines. And so they're showing an image and advertising creative that is come in today and get X amount off of X services.
Got it.
And or they are going out with a text only you know, no branding advertisement to, you know, with like a thought-provoking question of like, you know, have you ever wanted to make $1 million, right? Click here. And so you're causing a transaction, you're causing that low cost per lead, but you know, there's a question of quality of lead. And then I question when they see another transactional ad, what's going to make them stick with your brand? You're not creating any stickiness with your brand.
Yeah, the last thing you want is clickbait, right?
Yeah.
That example's good. I think, you know, we want to be everywhere and have everybody see our stuff, like for AR Workshop anyway. But I agree with you. I think you don't want to devalue your brand by offering these big discounts or incentives. And if you're not gonna, if it's something you're gonna offer all the time. So, and I think you're right. I mean, you get what you pay for, right? It's like you have to just pay attention to your ROI. Like, what kind of leads are you getting? Are those converting? And what, you know, what is your goal?
Mm-hmm.
It's constantly evolving, right? Like social media and the ad platforms are constantly changing. So it's kind of hard. It's a moving target too.
It is. And I like your summary of my long-winded explanation of clickbait. It is.
Yeah.
It's just clickbait. And it's driving me nuts.
And people are doing that with email marketing now too.
Mm-hmm.
The subject lines are becoming, and once you fall for one, I'm like, I'm not going to fall for it again as a consumer. If I see a great title and a subject of an email and I open it and I'm like, oh, they got me because they said this. Then the next one I get from that brand, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to fall for that again. I'm going to delete it.
Well, then now you're mad at the brand, right?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. And really, like I think Maureen said, it really should be not about how many leads you're getting and lowest cost per lead, but really what the leads are doing once you get them, right? Are they converting? Are they becoming customers? Are they becoming franchisees? Because we've all got caught in that trap where, you know, our marketing folks are saying, look, we got you 1,000 leads last month and like, look how good we are. And you're like, yeah, but what message did we send and what results did we end up getting? And are we building long-term brand commitment, or is it something that's just a one and done, or never even converting at all? And I think that's where we get really challenged, even on the Fran Dev side, when you look at, you know, you can get a lot of leads in through Facebook and Meta and all these things, but none of them ever call you back and none of them have any money, but they got a lot of leads, and it makes people crazy to have to try to chase them all down all the time. And so it's there has to be a middle ground, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that we owe it to those folks doing the marketing on our behalf to give them you know, to not hold them accountable to the number of lead, like, let's make sure that we're on the same page with what our end goals are. Because if we're asking them for more leads and then they deliver more leads, but we're saying, no, these aren't good enough, we've got to have that open communication to bridge the right partnership too. Okay,
And I think
great discussion.
getting away from the, just real quick, but getting away from the transactional and getting more about the brand, that's long-term thinking, right? That's about, that's doing something different because it's harder than the transactional stuff's easy. And I think that's where the franchisees, if they can understand that that's what the objective is, like, listen, we're putting deep roots in here and we need to be building the brand and making ourselves unique versus just doing what everyone else is doing. I think as a marketer, that's your opportunity.
Yes, and in having that conversation with franchisees is super fun, on, long-term success versus short-term gain. But I do think that that's where the benefit of being part of a franchise system really shines, because from a marketing standpoint, I can implement some long-term brand building solutions through a brand fund and then focus the franchisee on that transactional relationship with the right creative and copy. But it is, marketing is not overnight success. It is momentum building. And so, having those continued conversations with franchisees on what our goals are and what we expect to see, I think is a great point. Okay, let's jump into our first question today. I'm excited to discuss this, because I have a soft spot for it. But our question is, what should I expect out of my PR team? How do you measure success? I am not sure if I am getting a great value, but I keep hearing this is the best place to start for franchise development. So I'm gonna kick it off to you guys, and just for you guys to know in context, I worked for a PR agency for a really short, brief stint until I realized that it was not the role for me. So I do have some experience in this realm, and that's why I have a little bit of soft spot for all those PR folks out there busting their rumps to get us good coverage. So I'm going to pass it over. I'm going to have Maureen start this time with what her thoughts are.
Yeah, I think we worked with a PR firm for a short period of time, and we did not have a lot of success with it, but I think we didn't have expectations set up front. I think it's important that the PR agency that you're working with doesn't just sell you on their service to sell it. I would say under promise and over deliver, because, we had high expectations and didn't really see a huge value from it. And it just really depends on your goals, right? Like, do you just want exposure on TV? Do you want magazine coverage? Do you want, what are the goals? And I feel like for our small business, it was expensive for individual franchisees to pay for, versus doing some local pitching and more hyper local marketing, seemed to be a better ROI for us. So that's kind of my short answer to your question. We just haven't had a ton of experience with it. But I think big brands, it's important just for that brand awareness. You just have to level set with your PR agency. Make sure you're not disappointed in the end.
Mm-hmm. And I have some thoughts on that too. I think that you're absolutely right. You have to get clear on expectations. When you're entering into any new vendor partnership, I think, you're looking to bring someone on because you have identified a gap, but you've also identified that you don't know enough to fill the gap yourself, right? And so when you bring someone on, you're expecting a level of expertise for that gap to be filled. But then it's up to, I think, that person or that partner that you bring in to really communicate, okay, what can you expect from me? And how am I measuring if I'm doing this successfully or not? And, the reason why I think this question is so interesting is that, public relations is it is evolving just as much as social media and digital media is evolving as an industry and as what we can expect out of our PR experts and agencies that are out there. But it's evolving in a way that is very hard to, I think, show the level of effort it takes to get placement is 10 times more than what it was 10 years ago. It's 20 times more than it was 20 years ago. And that's simply because of supply and demand. You don't have the supply of news agencies out there anymore to fulfill the demand that all of us brands have about trying to get that third-party validation that PR brings to the table. And so being really clear, I think, about what your expectations are does help set up the relationship for success. But JT, in the Fran Dev world, I'm sure that you've had, the merry-go-round of PR experiences. So would love to get your input before I go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. We currently are using a PR. We've probably used 3 in the 20 years that I've been there, and probably had some gaps where we didn't have anyone. And I'm really pleased with how it's going currently, because first of all, we have to sit down and create a customized plan. Like, don't just rinse and repeat with every brand, because every brand's different. Everyone needs a little bit more. So really having them sit down with us and say, what does success look like with PR? And that's the hardest part, right? Because you talked about, even Maureen mentioned ROI. It's like, how do you measure that? Like, is it, we put out a PR piece and we got 8 more clicks on the website, so it worked? Is that a success? Is it not? Were they even related? Because it's so hard to understand sometimes as to what the real result is. I know I do get people that will call in and say, hey, I read your article on this, or I found you because of this PR piece and that PR piece. And so those are easily attributed. But a lot of times it's not, right? And so when when your budgets are getting crunched and everything else, and you look at PR saying, well, I don't know, no one called us and said, yeah, they found us because of PR. And so the usually is the quick first thing to go. So I think really having to understand what we're trying to achieve, what success looks like, and being clear about that, and then continually meeting with that PR company to make sure that we're on the same track and that they're delivering and really getting to the kind of candidate that we're looking for on the development side. I think the other piece that we've been able to take advantage of, which is becoming with the internet and social media and all this stuff, we find ourselves with as many franchisees and brands that we have, where we get into some firestorms sometimes, with people publishing false articles, trying to get clicks for different things, or and so they're really good at managing some of that stuff when we got a little bit of crisis management, on the media side, and also they've been helping me venting. I get a lot of requests for different things, and so I have them vet those things, and they'll come back and go, yeah, this one's for real, you should do that, and this one's not, don't bother. And so we've been able to take advantage of a lot of that as well, and using their expertise on the media side there.
I think those are great use cases that you've identified for PR. And I think, maybe taking a step back just for our listeners to get a sense of where PR fits and why it fits. I'll go in my little soapbox of, from a marketing perspective, you have paid, earned, and owned media. And so PR fits in that earned media category. Your paid media is what it sounds like, all of your advertising, and then your owned media is anything that you have control over. So your website, your email list, your social media pages. So in that earned category, the reason why it is even its own category is because when you get an earned placement, so you get something published in a newspaper, you're getting some third-party validation from that trusted reporter. That reporter has built trust with his or her audience, and they're now telling them about your brand. You're getting some third-party validation from it, and that's what makes PR more powerful than a paid advertisement, for example. However, that placement, that reporter is getting 5 pitches a day on the low side, and so that placement is hard to come by. And so sometimes your PR expense can feel almost equal to what your paid expense is, but it's a different, it's a different channel, it's a different avenue to talk to your customers about what you want them to know. So as that backdrop, and knowing that kind of PR is a one part of what should be a more robust strategy, I think what JT is saying, is absolutely valid in that not only is your PR team going to deliver some of that earned validation for you, but then they also can serve, like JT said, as a vetter for other opportunities that are coming on board. And then crisis communication is a art unto itself. And so not having a professional when you are in those crisis moments is scary. And so having someone that is at the very least a calm voice to say, okay, this is what we're going to do next, is super helpful. So when we're thinking about how to measure success in a PR agency, Maureen, what do you think, the failed PR experiment that you did, what do you think, if set up correctly, what were you looking for when you onboarded that PR team?
Yeah, we did it for franchise development. And I think our model what we find is our best candidates for owning a franchise are actually our raving fans, our customers. We found it. So I guess you could say it was a success because we found out who we don't want. Our model is very, strongly owner operated. It's not like a big franchise like a Chick-fil-A or something where you're going to make a lot of money, millions of dollars, and it's, a high investment stake. So we need to search for candidates in other areas than what we were doing originally with the PR company. We were publishing things in the news and they were getting local ads in different areas. And it was just the candidates we were getting were just not, they were looking for something bigger, like more hands off, where we really want hands-on operators. So for us, it's better for us to work with influencers or some of our VIP, customers that are raving fans and educating them on the opportunity instead.
Well, and I think that's a great point of even in that earned kind of focus of knowing your audience, right? So knowing who do you want to target so that then you can focus that PR team's energy on publications that are going to reach that audience.
Right.
And T, I think that you said that's part of your strategy session with your PR teams.
Yeah, like in I think Maureen, a little bit of what you're talking about is like even semi-absentee, right? People that want to buy a business but not work in it, but work on it, and maybe even keep their jobs in some cases. And there are places to look for those people. We only have one brand out of the 10 that will allow that. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense for the other 9 brands to be following that same blueprint, because we would just be getting a lot of people that would be frustrated because that's not what we're delivering or even offering at that point. So yeah, we have to sit down and really create a plan as to who we're looking for, why, and also where. There are also the ability for us to grow this business anywhere in the US, whereas maybe a smaller franchise wants to build out, one state at a time away from home so that they're not moving, trying to work from Seattle to Florida to Charlotte in your case. And so that maybe you're focusing your PR on a little bit more regional efforts versus global in terms of that scale.
Yeah, that's great.
Yep, those are good points. Well, great. I'm going to recap just for everybody, and because I do have such a soft spot for PR. So best practices, create a strategy with your PR team, understand how they're measuring their success. And so your expectations are aligned. And I think the third thing that I would say is you have to take responsibility for feeding stories to your PR team. They are not part of your team. They're not sitting with you. They don't see all of the awesome things that you're working on. And so it really is up to you to feed those stories to them in order for them to get the coverage that you need. I know that a lot of times I walk into brands and the PR team is there, but nobody's really managing them. And that doesn't set them up for success, and it doesn't set the brand up for success.
That's a great point.
It is a lot of work to manage your outside vendors, so you need to make sure you have clear ownership of who's responsible for that communication, because we definitely found it was a lot of work to keep up with it, but definitely worthwhile in the long run.
Yeah, and that could even be its own question for a future podcast of like, how do you manage? You bring in all this outsourced support because you are a small team, but if you don't have someone managing that resource, then it's going to be wasted. And that's, from a vendor partnership to if you bring on an individual to, if you bring on a new software platform, those things don't just run themselves, unfortunately. Well, good deal. Well, this was great. Thank you so much for sharing what you guys experienced in the PR space. I do think that will help others as they look for, should we not bring on PR? If we do have PR, what should we be looking for? So certainly appreciate your insight. And we will talk to you next time on Dear Frannie.
Thank you.